Hi, everyone. Woo. Happy Saturday. So it's the middle of May, and for the most part, we have not left our homes yet, and we're not really sure when we're going to even be leaving our homes. So anyway, I think before we start, let's go in. Let's just go inside and take those big, deep, healthy, healing, love-filled breaths, okay? So we're going to inhale 5, inhale love, hold and smile, smile when you're holding, and then exhale, ha. But when you exhale, exhale energy. So inhale love, hold, exhale. Okay, let's go. Inhale, hold, exhale, ha, ha. Inhale love, hold, smile, exhale, ha, ha. Last time, make it really yummy and good. Inhale love, hold, exhale, ha, ha. Okay, feeling good? Feeling grounded? I always like to put my feet on the ground as well. Have my shoes off and anyway, I'm really excited, very, very, very excited about today's conversation. So as I was putting together the intro, I kind of listened to things during the week. Maybe a little bit for inspiration, a little bit just to see what people are talking about and what's current. And I came across someone who I listen to often, and he's a monk, and he's a mindfulness coach, and he just does all these amazing, really fabulous things. And I was listening to his talk, and he was talking a lot about unconditional love. And I am completely enamored about love and unconditional love. So I listened a little bit more closely. And as he was talking, it just kept going on about how we have to offer people, we have to offer our loved ones, we have to offer our family, we have to offer our friends unconditional love. And again, I'm just kind of grooving to it, listening and following what he's saying. And by the third time he said it, my brain was sort of like, wait, stop. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's something here that I'm just not resonating with. Because one thing I know is that I cannot offer someone unconditional love if they are not being respectful to me, if they are treating me poorly, badly, unkindly. So as I'm really thinking about that, again, as somebody who just loves love and loves the concept and thought about unconditional love and relationships, it made me kind of go back and say, okay, well, what can I take from this talk that feels like me? And what I realized is that in any relationship, if it be a love relationship, if it be family, siblings, mom, dad, your friends, any of those relationships, before you can have a really healthy relationship, there's a couple of things that you have to think about, a couple of things that you have to have clarity on. And the first one is clarity. And you have to have clarity on what is it that you want? What is it that you value? What are your values? What are your core values? The second thing you need to understand is connection. And you have to be able to connect to yourself first to really understand who you are, what you want, what is really important to you. And that is exactly why I love this talk that we're having today. I'm going to introduce to you my dear friend, Alison Crair. I've been friends with Alison. I thought about this morning when I was putting this together. I was like, we've been friends for about 13 years. And this woman really is, she's fierce. You know, when I met her, she was a hardworking single mom, working full time, a single mom, and actually going to school to get her degree. And also in the midst of all this, she says, I'm going to do triathlons. And then I watch her like pivot and like start training really hard. And the next thing you know, she's doing triathlons. I mean, talk about grit. Like she's got the grit and the knowledge. And, you know, she's a recovery coach and a recovery expert. She does life coaching, and now she's pivoted into this program called the Pivot Program. And I've actually been working with her on this program for, I think I've done 3 sessions. And I have to tell you, it is very powerful, powerful work. So now I want to introduce to you my dear friend, Alison. Hey,
hi,
Alison.
Can you see me?
I can see you.
Good.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love that you reminded me that I did all that stuff.
I know. I
needed that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so take us a little bit on your journey. I mean, I shared with them a little bit about your past, but I know you love the Pivot Program, and I know it's something you're really passionate about now, and it's really been a game changer in your life. But
yeah.
First, I want you to kind of take us through the journey of how you got there. And
so it's been a long journey, which all of us have these long stories, you know, but I when we first met, I was selling real estate, and it just wasn't vibing for me. You know, there's that thing when you just know, and there's a voice that says, not this, you know. And so I went back to school, became a certified life coach, chemical dependency counselor. I opened a coaching practice while I was still selling real estate. And then I worked inpatient. So I've had a bunch of different avenues from this, and I've worked in the corporate sector for years. So I have a really good kind of center around that. And then worked a lot with law enforcement and first responders with just coaching and helping them with, you know, some of the stuff that they go through. But what happened is a couple of years ago, I was exposed to the pivot process. The woman that put it all together, Lori Jean Glass, it's, you know, it's really revolutionary the way in which it is taught. So for me personally, I've done a bunch of work. You and I really bond on all of the willingness that we are to work, right? So we're always sharing like, oh, I did this workshop, or I did this, or I'm going to this, or have you tried this, you know, over the years. So I grew up in a family of origin that was extremely challenging. So I had a lot of attachment issues that would show up in relationship with me either attaching anxiously or, you know, saying screw you and running and just not dealing with it. And so anyway, so a couple of years ago, exposed to the pivot process, and I went through it, and it shifted me to such an extent that I was able to let go of so many of the things that weren't working for me. And all I can say is the story that really comes to mind for me around this was that I went through the pivot process, and I kept thinking like, am I going to come unglued? Am I, you know, like afraid to do this work? And then you go through it and you don't come unglued. It allows you to look at your past, and also look at your survival patterns and the things that you do that don't work for you anymore, or that create conflict. But so I went through it, and a week later, my mother, who I had a very challenging relationship with, had a stroke. And so I went up to the hospital where she was, and I walked in that hospital room without all of the baggage, without all of the stuff. I was able to show up for myself and for her in that room with a boundaried self, knowing what my expectation was from myself and from her. And so the joy that that brought for me, that I wasn't like, oh, she's, obviously had a stroke, but she still owes me something, that feeling that you get like when you have a damaged relationship. So, that's my own testimony about it. But I would say probably half of my coaching clients are pivot clients, that they do that. But most all of my clients have relational issues, that whether they're recovery coaching clients or something else, where they relapse over relationships, or, the pain people go through so much of the time has to do with relationships. So that's kind of a long-winded way I got there.
No, I love that, because it really is true. I mean, and the other thing of what you said that, hits me is that when we have clarity that way, it also is so much less stress on our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And, for somebody who is considered a wellness expert, I always look for those things, like how our emotional well-being affects our nervous system.
Right.
So, just you telling that story, like I could connect the dots on how your nervous system could go into like complete chaos as you're getting ready to prepare or walk into that room to see your mom.
Right.
But when you have this work and you have these distinctions, it's like everything stays calm. It's like,
well, you know what the expectation is, right? And so when we have, and this, I just want to make this clear, that everybody has issues with the way in which we attach to stuff. The goal is always to attach securely, right? But everybody, so we're not just talking about people that have had really challenging childhoods. Everybody has an episode. You can have something happen to you in the 4th grade, which then creates a story in your head, which then you operate from, right? So, yeah.
So I think what I want to, get into is everything about these conversations with my people are all about giving people some concrete tools,
Mm-hmm.
so that when they shut off, that they can have some clarity on a couple things that they can do to literally, in this case, to pivot. Yeah. So again, I've been doing this for the last few weeks. And even after the first time I did it, I had some clarity about people in my life. And again, it was where I was coming from, the expectation that I was putting on them. Mm-hmm. That was just inappropriate. So why don't you just take us through, like, I know the other day when we talked, like it was about how the pivot would help you go from, I think technically they call it from fantasy to reality, but we also talked about it going from anxiety to trust. Right. So why don't you take us through like maybe 3 simple steps that people can sort of see, A, B, and C, going from, anxiety to trust or fantasy to reality. Like how would they navigate during this program?
Well, I think that we had talked about that we really were going to talk about boundaries, in this, and how lack of boundaries creates anxiety. And I love that you said from anxiety to trust. That's not really the pivot language. The pivot language is from fantasy to reality. But I love anxiety to trust, because that's also really what happens for people, myself included. When you have a boundary system that you create that's individualized for you, that's where it takes you. You have something that you can refer back to when you start to get a little confused about how you're supposed to show up or someone else. So I would say, if we're just going to do 3 things, really getting clear on what your boundaries are. And if you're confused about what boundaries are, it's really limits and guidelines that keep you safe emotionally and physically. So if we go through like your most inner circle, so we call this the circle boundaries. The inner circle.
Can I hold this up?
Yeah, there it is.
I love this. I'm going to tell you, I made copies. I'm putting them all over my house. just until
Love that.
it's embedded in my head, because I really feel like I have learned so much from this. And of course, I have like literally filled it in other areas here. Like I took it and then I made my own and sort of,
Yeah,
because
that's perfect.
I needed it clearer. So I
Get
mean,
an A for our next session.
I know. No, because like the truth is, when I feel something and I connect to it, and I also see the merit in it, and it,
Yeah.
to me, it's like, oh my God, like everybody should be doing this because they get so much clarity.
Yeah.
So take us a little bit like through, just like, because I know when I first saw this and I saw the inner, and I understand that that was like unconditional love, and then the good and the semi and the acquaintance and the outer. When I first saw unconditional love, and that's probably why my brain went stop
Right.
last week when I was doing that, because when I saw that unconditional love, of course I was like, oh, my husband goes in there, and my son goes in there, and my sister Terry goes in there, and my cousin Patty goes in, like my friend Karen, like, oh, you go in there, like, and then you were like, whoa, 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 go back. Like, no, we don't put all those people in there, because, and then when we really talked about it, we realized, well, wait a minute, like, no, unconditional love is like your highest power and you.
Right.
Like that.
That's your sacred place. So, you know, a lot of people, and I want to make this really clear, because a lot of people think, well, my spouse has to be in my inner, right? The way in which we teach this is that your inner is, yes, it's unconditional, but it's unconditional to show up, right? So one thing about boundaries, which is really important to understand, is that they are reciprocal, right? It means that you show up the same way that that other person shows up. So this, really getting clear on that really helps maintain your energy and conserve it. And so, you know, like the story you and I were sharing was like when our kids were in school, you know, there was always that person that would say, hey, can you bring the cookies and set up the fair and do all kinds of stuff, you know, and you know, we're like, okay, you know, we have to do all that, but without setting that boundary. And then you're exhausted, you know, they're not talking to the people that don't work. They're talking to the people that are working, you know? So, but the inner is really, for me personally, I don't have a human being in my inner, because to show up unconditionally, I think is unrealistic for a human being. And this is just me. So you can create your boundaries how you want them, but the way in which the word to just remember for your inner is unconditional. So a lot of people will have a higher power or God or their pet, you know, someone that's always going to show up. Okay. And then adding other characteristics in there. So a lot of people will say, okay, so that it's unconditional, and obviously I have to trust them, and they have to be non-judgmental, and you know, you get to decide what that looks like. Right. So that's inner. And then the good category is based in trust. So that's the second one. So usually,
and then after that, I wanted to put everybody in that, like
in the semi.
Like, okay, so they can't go in inner; they're all going into good,
right?
Because I kept thinking, well, it has to be like, if the people I love the most, then that has to be it. But then I learned very quickly that it wasn't how much you love them; it was just what the appropriateness was regarding the situation, regarding the relationship, regarding, and it was like, oh, I guess they're not going into the good. Not that I don't love them, but there were just some situations that didn't allow that to be there yet.
Right. And it's really, I mean, you know, that's a really hard part for everyone to get. Like, if I really love this person, they should be in my good. So if good is based in trust, you know, that's really, and that's reciprocal. That means that if you call me and you say, I really need you right now, but I've got, you know, something going on with my husband, or I've got something going on with my kids or whatever, I may have to say, look, I love you. I can't be there for you right now. And then that's what the expectation is. But I will call you right back, you know, whereas unconditional would be like drop everything and show up for that person, right? So if it's really based in trust, that also means that you can call up, be vulnerable. I'm really having a hard day right now, and that you don't feel judged. So a lot of times
I also call it like the good is the one where you have your mask off with these people.
mm-hmm.
Like these are the people
right.
that the mask is off, you know, you're sharing completely authentically, like the person you're sharing your fears, your everything, you know, that's that person that you can do that with.
Yeah.
There isn't anything that you can't tell them, like no matter how hard, if they've done something that hurt your feelings or did something that disrespected you, or you felt disrespected, at least, that you could have that conversation, and you could trust that they have the consciousness and the emotional intelligence to be able to have that conversation with you without getting defensive and without getting punitive and without making you wrong. Like it's that level of, and the one thing I'm going to say, like for you people out there, if you can't put your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband in the good section, then maybe they need to definitely do a little work.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Just had to throw that in there. Because I don't have that with my husband, but I have definitely had that with past relationships, that I could have never put you in the good. Like I just could not put you in the good. So,
right, but we would try. We would put them in the good, and we have those expectations,
we would get so
trust.
frustrated because we couldn't trust them. They couldn't trust that they could really show up for us in that way, in that loving and that gentle and that, you know,
the years of disappointment that we walked around with, because the years of disappointment that we walked around with.
Oh, gosh. It was crazy.
I know. So, you know, and what you just did was list the other characteristics for your good, you know, that someone has the high tolerance for confrontation, that you can really have hard conversations and get through it, knowing that they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, they're not going to run. They're not going to be like giving you the finger and slamming the door. Like,
well, they might. I mean, here's the thing is that, you know, we're human beings.
Wait a minute. If they do, then they go to semi.
They could. Oh my God. I hope Lori Jean, who started this, is watching. She was just be loving it right now. So yeah, but also that you can go, because we're human beings, our stuff is going to get triggered, right? And so, you know, we haven't gotten to the part of the curriculum where we really go into like parts of self, but just real quick, you know, stuff happens to us when we're a kid, or I think we started it, but you know, and how our child energy is and our teenager energy. And, you know, typically that teenager energy is the one who's like, you know, screw you, I'm out of here, you know, but someone who's in your good is going to come back and say, you know, I'm really sorry I behaved that way. You know, whatever. But I think it's important to know so that the inner is unconditional and you can create what that looks like for you. Your good is based in trust, and you can also create what other things need to be in there for someone that you trust. And then the semi category, which is typically people's largest category. And it's also a little bit confusing at first, because you can have, and so the word to remember is shared interest. And so that means that it could be someone who's in your book club and you have a shared interest with that, but it could also be your kids, because like my kids are in my semi, because, and I couldn't love my kids more than anybody else on the planet, right? But I'm not gonna, a good that is based in trust and that I'm telling everything to, I'm not going to burden my kids by telling them all my stuff. It's just not appropriate. That creates enmeshment, right? So as kids grow into adults, you can kind of decide what feels comfortable for you around that. But so the way in which I personally make this work for me with the semi is that I have sort of levels. So I have a level that's closer to good, which would be where my kids are. And then I have a level that's closer to acquaintance, which would be, more of the people who I don't know that well, or, something like that. But the word to remember for that is shared interest. And it still requires respect. So I think that you and I discussed also that what the boundaries do really is help you manage your expectations, because it's reciprocal and it means you show up the same way. It helps you walk into that situation knowing, okay, this person is a semi. I don't have to tell them all my personal details. I have to be polite and respectful, and I can have fun with this person, and I can talk about X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people have extremely fulfilling friendships like that.
Well, it's interesting because I remember about a year ago, somebody very close in my life, I felt like they were avoiding me. And so, we finally got together and he said to me, I don't know if you noticed, but I've been avoiding you. And I said, yeah, I did notice. Like, what's happening? And he said, I love you and I so respect everything you do in your life. Like, I respect the work you do on yourself spiritually and emotionally. And I love the fact that you're mentoring all these people and that you're constantly, out there speaking and doing and growing and talking about what you talk about. He said, but I have to tell you, like, what you talk about, it makes me feel uncomfortable. He said, so when I come and I'm around your house and I'm with you and your husband and you guys talk about what we talk about, because, we talk about deep things. Like, we're just, it's probably why I love my husband so much. Like, we talk about deep shit. Like, we're not just sitting around, like, we really get in there. We talk about our feelings and transformation and whatever. We had just come back from an amazing, we'd done equine therapy together, and we were, sharing the whole program and what we got out of it. And we did a ropes course, and we were sharing that. And he said, that stuff just makes me uncomfortable. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, the last thing I ever want is somebody who I care about and love so dearly to feel uncomfortable. So I was just like, you know what, like, let's create guidelines, like, or what is our rule of engagement? Like, that's my language. Like, what is our rule of engagement that you're comfortable talking about? Because I love you and I want to feel great when we're together. And we created some of the topics that he felt good with, and I did. And the truth of it is, like, after we had that authentic, honest conversation, it's amazing. Like, nobody's in avoidance. Nobody, like, I know when the conversation, if somebody goes a little deep, where before when somebody in the room would go deep, I would just like latch on to that and just, that was my sign of, oh, they want more depth here. Let me go for it, because that's what I love, But when he was around and somebody went deep, I would just sort of pivot the conversation to where I knew this person would be comfortable. And when you have those guidelines, it just makes everything so much, it's like, it's freedom. It's liberating. It's actually so liberating.
That's right.
And that's why when I started the program, I thought, that was basically, we were doing like the pivot circle boundaries without knowing it. So it really is so powerful. And again, like, now, we have a really great, authentic conversation because we have clarity.
Yeah. And you, I know who that person is, and I know you couldn't love that person any more than you do. And, a lot of people can build relationships on, especially in this political climate right now, a lot of people cannot talk to each other, they just can't, but they're in the same family, or, a lot of people I know that are our age, their parents think a certain way or whatever, and they're just like, I just can't do it. And I'm like, then don't do it. Then you go over there and you talk about baking soup and hairdos, whatever it is that you that feels like it's right. And you don't have to be right here. You know, there's a saying we say a lot is, do you want to be right or do you want to be relational? You know, and so if you want to be right, you're going to really get into it. I have a few clients who just are like, no, they have to understand what the way they think is not right, you know. But it's like, well, then you're not going to have a relationship with that person, or you're going to always be in turmoil over it. But if you can pick a few safe topics, you can do that. So
no, and I have definitely fallen into that, like self-righteousness of the conversations that I have, the way people need to live a more authentic, more transformed life. And, you know, I just, of course, you know, I want everybody to be awakened. I want everybody to have consciousness. I want everybody to be able to connect and speak their truth kindly, like all of the things that I value and what my core values are. And everybody in my life pretty much knows my core values are very simple: respect of self, respect of others, respect of property, speak my truth kindly, and trust. Like truth. Because I feel like that covers everything. That covers loyalty, it covers integrity, it, you know, if you really go down to it. And I want everybody to have those same core values so that we can just sort of live in this blissful life with each other. But it's so not true. Like, but yet there's people I care about and I love that don't have those same values. And I don't have to, but I choose that I want to still have relationships with them. So this has been so amazing, because then you just see where you put them. And again, you're not putting them in like the semi or even the acquaintance, because I've put some people who I love dearly in the acquaintance, only because all we can really have is cordial conversations. You know, not because I'm good and they're bad, not because they're good and I'm bad, just because of the way we are.
Yeah.
There's no judgment to it. It's just like our conversations have to just be more cordial. And then we can be together and be fine. Yeah. We just can't go into anything too much, you know.
Well, and I think it really helps you to decide, you know, we go in and out of relationship with people, you know, so you'll have somebody who comes into your life for a certain amount of time for a certain reason or whatever. And it can be a really intense friendship. And then something happens and that has to be shifted. And so the boundaries really are for us, right? They're for us to decide. It's not for you to decide where you call up somebody and you're like, I'm moving you to acquaintance because of X, Y, and Z, right? Yeah. You're just going to move them to acquaintance and understand that that's what the expectation is. Now they may start to get a little uncomfortable, right? And you might have to have a discussion like, you know, due to the fact that, you know, you stole from me or whatever it was, or, you know, you would maybe make them an outer, but you know what I'm saying is that it's for you to maintain.
Last year, I mean, again, I didn't know this, but I saw that I moved somebody really from a good to an acquaintance, you know, because I tried to have a conversation with them about how I felt from a situation. And again, it was like there was no conversation. It was just basically, well, I did this and I did that and I did this and that should have been enough. Like and I'm just like, you know, and that kind of there's nothing in that that's good. Like there's nothing in that that's relational for me. That's like understanding and let me just say and then you say, I hear you, you know, like the way that a conversation.
It's not safe for you.
It's not safe. It was actually like, and then I thought at the end that we made some move. Like I kind of felt good when I walked out of there. I felt like, all right. And then I, you know, find out that no, there was no move. So I thought, what?
Yeah.
I mean, so you just kind of say, well, that's okay. You know what? That was the first time we really even had that, a kind of a confrontation. But and then I went as far as to tell the person, I said, you know, you are always defensive. Like, I don't feel comfortable, because they kept saying, well, why didn't you come to me sooner? And I'm like, you know, because every time I've tried to come to you with stuff, I never feel safe coming to you to have these conversations. You get very defensive and you can be a bit of a bully. And so the signs were there before, but for whatever reason, because I love her. Like I love this person.
Right.
So I just didn't want to move. Like, and then finally it was like, you know, that saying, there's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, all right, finally it's like doom. But again, like now I believe I could have a great relationship with her in a cordial situation. I mean, maybe it could go to semi.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, the she's probably more like a lower semi, and that this is where because if you run into this person someplace, you're going to be more than cordial.
Right.
You're going to be like, hi, how are you? You know, it's going to be a little bit more,
Right.
or you're going to, you know, so this is the perfect example of this is where you need to come up with safe topics,
Right.
you know, because there's a shared interest. The safe topics are, you know, the kids, whatever, vacation, and you stay out of any kind of sharing of your intimate details. And then it just keeps it light, you know? So after semi is, we were just talking about acquaintance, right? And so the main word for that would be cordial. And that's just, hi, how are you? You know, somebody you see at the grocery store, hi, how are you? Then that's it. You don't want to go any further, or you don't know them that well. You're not going to, you know, have dinner with them or whatever. And then the next boundary would be outer, which is no contact. And so that's obviously where you move someone that you don't trust anymore, or that is not safe for you, in the sense that like an ex-husband maybe that you don't want to talk to, or an ex-boyfriend, or someone who's just not safe. And but you get to decide where people go. You know, it's probably not healthy to change people just you know, we had talked about an example of like, well, say you go on vacation with somebody, can I move them up to my good? Well, it just all depends. You know, are you going to want to tell this person your personal details, and when you don't have a level of trust with them? So you can move people around. And my example for you was that, you know, I have someone who's in my outer that I don't want to have a relationship with, I don't have contact with, but every once in a while, I have to be around this person because of family connection. So I have to be around this person. So I move that person for that event up to acquaintance, knowing that all I have to do is be cordial. Because if I don't deliberately do this in my head, then what could happen is that I start to get anxious and want to you start to like over disclose, like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing, you know, like, because you get anxious, right? So if you just remind yourself, well, this person is an acquaintance, all I have to do is say, hi, how are you? That's it. And then after that event is over, they're an outer, I'm not in contact with them.
Right. I mean, the thing that again, you know, because my big word is clarity and connection. Like, all of this keeps you in such impeccable clarity.
Yeah.
And, you know, when things are clear, you can see everything, you know, and when you're connected to yourself, which really this just all it does is keep bringing you back to self. What do I want? Like it really, and all like the thing that's so amazing is then you can flow. It leaves so much space. It liberates you to really be able to flow in all of these relationships. So really it really is profoundly powerful in relationships,
and pretty simple, which is why
that's what I love about it. Isn't like years and years. You don't have to go back and like go through years of, you know, your feelings, your life, your story, your this. It's just like it's so practical that that's why I'm really passionate about like, you know, people jumping on this and doing it, because I think like, I mean, I have this little thing. I'm thinking, wow, like everybody should do like a pivot before the holidays because you know, people get so much anxiety before they're going to family, or it should be done. Like it should be mandatory with every wedding invitation that goes out. There's like a little pivot thing. So people,
that's a great idea.
I mean, because in this way, like everything could be like carefree and like so liberating for people to just go and have like really great times,
Yeah.
you know? So
Well, and Pivot has a dating module that really takes people through the boundaries, but also really gets, that clarity around what it is that you want. What do you want in a partner? What are your non-negotiables, right? So understanding what your non-negotiables are is really incredible because you get to decide everything. That's one of the other things that I got out of doing this was that, oh my gosh, I get to decide, like I thought that, the way in which I kind of bend is sort of like, I see how other people are acting, just because of my own upbringing and everything. But when you go through this and you're like, oh, I get to decide what feels right for me, it's not going to be 100%, so I get calls all the time from my Pivot clients who are like, oh, this is what happened. I ran into this person in the store and, she's such a bitch and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where are they in your circle boundaries? She's a semi. So what was your expectation, that she would be any different, and they're like, oh, okay. So it just kind of like puts it back into to place. But the dating module is so great also because you get your non-negotiables. And then when you're kind of interviewing somebody that you're going to date, then you can say non-negotiable smoker, non-negotiable whatever.
right. No, I mean, I mentor a lot of, young women in their 20s, and every once in a while stuff comes up about their personal life. And I'm always a little bit startled when they start talking to me about some of the relationships they're in. And they're not really sure, like if they're exclusive, if they're not exclusive, what it is. And, and all of a sudden I'm like, but they've been romantic with these people.
Right. So that's because you slept with a semi. And then you're sad that they're not calling you, but you haven't had enough time.
Sometimes they've slept with an acquaintance.
Or an outer.
But then they want to make them a good, but they want them to respond to them in a good way. And it's like, if they would just say that, and again, there's nothing wrong with sleeping with an acquaintance. I mean,
whatever.
It's 2020, like it's great, but be clear about it. I'm aware I'm going to be having a sexual relationship with an acquaintance or a semi, and I can't fantasize about them becoming a good, because in that fantasy is where, number one, it just jacks up your nervous system. It makes you go wackadoo in your head because you're trying to, why didn't they call? What, like you're so like in it. It's like, I'm thinking like, this is amazing when you're like, you have clarity.
Well, if you go through the whole process, if people go through the whole thing where you look at your life, you look at your life in a whole perspective, you do the circle boundaries, you look at all of the messaging that you got from your childhood and the patterns that developed out of that. And then how you attach, how we learn to attach or not attach is a huge driver for us, right? So much of the time we make decisions from places that are not at our higher self, right? So we make decisions out of our child self or our teenage self. And it's like, well, wait a second. If your healthy adult is making this choice, you're not going to just let your teenager decide that, yeah, I'm going to go down to Mexico with these people and go do this partying, even though I have work on Monday, whatever it is. But
right.
So you do the pivot process, and then you come out the other side and who's driving the bus. You've created that healthy adult for yourself. I'm not telling you who that healthy adult is. I'm helping you come up with what the characteristics of a healthy adult are for you, so that's also why it's individualized. It's like, men go through it, women go through it, couples go through it, where you can really help couples see how their perception of their coupleship is versus what's really going on. One person thinks things are great. The other person thinks things are horrible, So it works across many lanes.
Well, I just love it. I really, really do. I'm so excited about it. And this was great, 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 great. So you guys, Alison is also offering 25 for the first 25 people that sign up on my website, laviniaerico.com, for her. She's going to be giving a 15-minute consultation, a free consultation on this. We're also going to be putting a lot of stuff online about this with different ways that you can start incorporating some of these techniques. Because again, it's simple, it's easy. And I think it's really, again, because I always talk about, I don't care if I'm doing a workshop in entrepreneurship, doing a workshop in joy in the journey, it's always about connecting to yourself. And this process will definitely get you connecting to that deep, deep, abiding connection of self that we all really need in order to really go out there and do life. And especially at times like this, because I think with everything that's going on, we have to have this clarity, because everything around us is going to be so friggin' chaotic. Like there's just so much chaos. And if you get caught up in that chaos and that energy of everybody else's energy, you're going to be everywhere and nowhere. So this is the time to really hone in and do that work on self. And I'm really excited about this program because it's like Alison said, it's easy. It doesn't take years of therapy. It doesn't take years of, all this other stuff of meditating 2 hours in the morning, though I believe all that's really important. It's just not for everybody. And maybe once you do this program, you'll want to.
Well, and I do want to be clear though, you're doing some work on this. You're doing your work.
I know you're doing work. I'm not taking that away.
Yeah. But I just want to manage expectations that, I've done a lot of therapy and you've done a lot of therapy. We've done a lot of stuff.
That's probably why I'm finding it so much easier, because I have done 30 years of therapy. But still, I still think that the way it's presented is just really genius. The way it's, really, I'm really impressed with that. And I have done a lot of work in a lot of different ways. So Alison, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun. It went so fast.
I know. I can't believe we're already over. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next week. And again, thank you for everybody that keeps tuning in and sending their comments and questions. So appreciative. Our sponsors who keep growing all the time. And I'm really humbled, and I just really love being here. I love this community. So thank you so much. Okay. Bye.
Bye.